Elizabeth Warren is endorsing Joe Biden for president. In a video message, the Massachusetts senator became the final major 2020 Democratic presidential candidate to throw her support behind the former vice president.
Joe Biden has spent nearly his entire life in public service. He knows that a government run with integrity, competence, and heart will save lives and save livelihoods. And we can't afford to let Donald Trump continue to endanger the lives and livelihoods of every American. And that's why I'm proud to endorse Joe Biden as President of the United States.
By CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns. So Caitlin, tell me, what do you think this means for Joe Biden to have her endorsement?
Hi, Rita. Well, it is endorsement week for the Biden campaign. Earlier this week, you saw Bernie Sanders throw his weight behind Joe Biden in a live stream. Yesterday, the former vice president got a boost and an endorsement from former President Barack Obama. And today, Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren is one of the last of the 2020 contenders to endorse Joe Biden. When she got out of the race about over a month ago, she said she was going to take her time and kind of figure out next steps. And over those past several weeks, she's kind of let Bernie Sanders' campaign run its course. He, of course, has exited the race and supported Biden. And she has also been working in the Senate on coronavirus proposals and kind of focusing her work there. This endorsement is significant for Biden for a couple of different reasons. One, it really helps to gel the entire rest of the field, the former field, around and show this kind of unity message that Biden's team has been trying to put forward this week. It also will bring with it an intensely loyal following that she has. She's been a prolific fundraiser at the grassroots level. She has a significant social media following and has been able to kind of chart her own course over the course of her own campaign with selfie lines and kind of not doing these big fundraisers and figuring out ways to raise money online. So she can bring a lot to the Biden campaign. And of course, a lot of her proposals, which were at the center of her own campaign, are something that the Biden team is considering. Notable is that the Biden team endorsed her bankruptcy proposal recently and some other of her plans. So the teams are working together, and this shows the message from the Biden campaign is that the Democratic Party, at least at the top levels, are unified around this candidate.
That's so interesting to hear. I mean, we heard from Bernie Sanders yesterday and the fact that he's got platforms that he'd also like the Democratic Party to take up. And hearing you now say that some of Elizabeth Warren's ideas are really being accepted by the Biden camp. Why do you think it is, Caitlin? You mentioned a month ago was when she dropped out, really right after Super Tuesday. Why do you think it is that it took her this long to come and finally endorse Biden?
Well, she made clear when she got out of the race that she was going to take her time to decide who she was going to endorse. During that time, Bernie Sanders was still in the race, and there was, some concern about whether she would endorse Sanders or Joe Biden. We've talked about before how, at least on paper, it seemed like a lot of her supporters would join with Bernie Sanders, that there was an overlap there. But really, we saw more of an overlap of her supporters with supporters of Joe Biden and people like Pete Buttigieg, college-educated voters who were inclined to those campaigns. So her supporters weren't necessarily going to go to Bernie Sanders. In fact, we saw over the course of primaries that a lot of people were there were overlaps between her and some of the other candidates. So there wasn't this kind of neat fit there. And also she was the kind of candidate who wanted to be helpful, who wanted to make sure she was kind of behind a winner because she had put so much stake in a lot of these policy proposals. So there are a lot of questions about why she didn't get behind Biden earlier, but we know that the teams have been talking, and this is a orchestrated effort by the Biden campaign to be rolling out these high-profile endorsements. And we saw kind of a similar scenario back on Super Tuesday when we saw former candidates endorse Joe Biden one after another. We're kind of seeing a similar type of deal here with Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama, and Elizabeth Warren.
But it has been quite a week of endorsements from President Obama to Bernie Sanders, and as we're talking, Elizabeth Warren. What do you think all these endorsements ultimately mean for Joe Biden? So many people question momentum. Will people get out in November? We've got the coronavirus situation also factoring in, but having from these different camps within the Democratic Party these endorsements, what do you think it means for Joe Biden?
Well, two different things. First, there was a lot of talk after 2016 about the importance of having a unified party going in to 2020. And so this is certainly an effort by Democrats in leadership positions to really unify and coalesce around the presumptive nominee, Joe Biden, kind of learning those lessons from 2016 about the effects that a fractured party could have on their election chances. So this is certainly evidence of that, and you see people really moving quite quickly. And then you mentioned the pandemic, which is, of course, the backdrop to all of this. And we've seen in the endorsements coming from Sanders, from Obama, from Warren this week, a reference to the current state of affairs and the need that they say for new leadership to kind of guide people through this. All of these endorsements have mentioned Joe Biden's work with the former president on these kinds of issues and kind of painting him as someone that can lead the country through not only a pandemic, but an economic crisis as well, effects of which will be lingering on through the November election. So it's really important that you bring that up because that certainly is the backdrop for a lot of these endorsements this week.
Such a good point on the economic component as well as we're dealing with this pandemic. I got to tell you, Caitlin, I kind of laughed a little bit when a short while ago, recently, Bernie Sanders held a live stream event with singer Cardi B, the two of them together. Kind of made me laugh, but they were both trying to sort of shore up support behind Joe Biden. It was interesting to see how important is that these different camps don't feel turned off by Joe Biden, that they're really trying to show their support to really rally behind him.
I had the same reaction too, Rena. Bernie Sanders' live stream has been a place where a lot of people have been making appearances. He, over the course of his campaign, showed that he was able to kind of bring these people like this into the fray, into the political conversation, had a lot of backing from people like Cardi B, and was able to really harness that in social media. And that's what Bernie Sanders can really bring to the Biden campaign. Remember, Biden is not a very prolific fundraiser, and he's not as savvy with social media as someone like Bernie Sanders has been able to do. So this was kind of a way to bring that into the fold here. But it does raise some questions about whether supporters of Bernie Sanders are actually going to come over and show up for Joe Biden. There's still some work to do that the Biden campaign has to do to be able to really get those supporters over to his side. And the person that I'm going to be looking for over the next coming days and weeks are people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman from New York, and members of the so-called squad that had endorsed Bernie Sanders. They have not yet come over to Biden's side, and AOC has said earlier this week in an interview with the New York Times that she had not talked to the Biden campaign. Today, she said in an interview with Politico that their teams have now been talking after that New York Times interview. So could an endorsement be on the way? We'll see. But this kind of shows that there is still work for the Biden team to do. Bernie Sanders is trying to help with that effort.
Caitlin Huey-Burns. Caitlin, thank you very much for joining us.